Welcome to Stout for Christ, a radio ministry of Stout Memorial United Methodist Church in Parkersburg, West Virginia, with our host, Sarah Sisson.
I'm Sarah Sisson, host of Stout for Christ, and we're glad you're listening to our radio show today. Stout for Christ is a ministry of Stout Memorial United Methodist Church located at 3329 Broad Street in Parkersburg, West Virginia. We invite you to become a member of our Stout Church family. We offer 2 worship services each Sunday, a contemporary worship service at 8:45 and a traditional worship just following this broadcast at 10:45. If you can't join us in person, our services are broadcast live on Facebook and YouTube. Stout for Christ is a ministry meant to help us navigate life and learn more about God's love for all people. Today our topic is What Did I Learn? And here to help us learn more about this subject is Pastor Helen Oates. Welcome, Helen.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you. That's such an open-ended question, but I was thinking about, we've come through 40 days of Lent and then a week in terms of Holy Week, and last Sunday we celebrated Easter. So in all of that time, I posed the question to myself, okay, now what glimpses of God did I get? What did I experience? What did I learn? And I came up with a few points, and I thought this Sunday that I just kind of share those as a way to kind of spark some conversation. So my first one, because we did the Lenten study on forgiveness that was written by Adam Hamilton, I realized that there was something that I thought I had forgiven, but and forgotten, but when that head was raised again in terms of having contact with the individual, I realized that I had not asked forgiveness from her. And so during Holy Week, a couple of messages came from her on Facebook, and I just ignored them like I've ignored all the other messages that have come. But and that made me think, okay, so if I'm doing this, I'm avoiding, and that's not really helpful. She doesn't know that this is problematic for me in terms of any communication with her, and yet I need to be able, as the rest of his book title says, to find peace with letting go. And so I realized, one of the things that I learned was that I realized I need to do more work along with God in this piece of forgiveness, and just be able to continue to grow. And this has been an issue that's been in my life for 40 some years, and I just I thought it was done and gone until those messages came, and I realized that my action was avoiding them, not opening them up to see. So it made me realize that I needed to, as I said, do some more work, to be in prayer, to even reach out and express some forgiveness for the way in which I had initially responded to her. So that's one thing that I learned.
It's hard to, ask for forgiveness for something you've done, or to forgive someone who's, you felt has wronged you in some way.
Well, and then, to allow 40 years to pass, mm-hmm. To allow that kind of time. And for the, so much of the way that I cope with individuals who I don't see eye to eye with is I just kind of erase them out of thought and mind, and that's not the best way of coping or dealing with individuals. So I certainly wouldn't want to be erased out of someone's mind because of something that they perceived that I had done. So, yeah, the best way is to communicate and to forgive and to let go of it. So, because of that book, Adam Hamilton presented a second learning that I had during this Holy Week and Easter time. He presented talking about where Jesus came from. Always thought that Jesus, associated Jesus with Nazareth, and that his life was always lived out in Nazareth until he became 29 or 30 and then moved into the ministry that God had for him. But Adam Hamilton said that in one of his trips to Israel, he had an opportunity to visit a small village near Nazareth, and in fact, it had been a place where Jesus lived. Set up that carpenter shop, but what he said about his experience of visiting the site was looking at the ruins of that little village, being able to see that houses there were built with stone. So to expand my view of Jesus the carpenter as one who not only worked with wood, but also who was a stonemason. So that just kind of really blew my mind this Lenten Holy Week time, because I've often gone to John in those passages of Scripture that I use often at funerals in terms of Jesus speaking to his disciples, where he says to them that he's going to make a place for them. He's going to build a place for them. And I've always had heard that in light of wood, a carpenter carrying in the hammer and nails and a plane maybe to make a piece of wood smooth. But what Hamilton said as he talked about this place where Jesus lived was that there was very little wood in that area. So to work on things, to work on putting a house together would have meant dealing with stones. And the work of a stonemason is one that requires lots of strength to be able to lift rock, chisel rock. This year at our Good Friday service, we had a chisel and hammer to have a go at a large rock, and just placing that chisel and trying to get even a little bit of rock to separate. It took power, it took strength. So I think this is the first time that I've thought of Jesus as a muscle man, as one who had those as what are they called? The abs that are 6 or 8. I mean, just in terms of a strong individual who was able to do that kind of work. Usually today we hire our contractors, and our contractors will deal with the people who do the woodwork inside and maybe lay brick or whatever on the outside, or even a stone face for a house. But it gets sent out to different people who have those specific skills. But in Jesus's day, to hear that Greek word carpenter isn't just a someone who works with wood, but it is a carpenter with stone, so a stonemason as well. And the kinds of things that Jesus could have made out of stone. I know when I visited the area where Jesus was beaten before he was crucified, there was a stone. It looked just like a bucket, but it was made out of stone. And they said that was the place where they had the vinegar in order to try to waken Jesus up while he was on the cross. But so to think about those objects, when we saw where King Solomon would have had all of his horses, we could see the stone troughs that were made for the horses from which they could eat. So all the kind of stonework that went into that culture. We hear about Jesus being born in a trough, a manger. Most likely it was a horse trough that was stone, that maybe had some hay in it because of the way in which the supply of wood wasn't as plentiful. So for me, that was another expansion of my mind in terms of being able to take in that notion of Jesus as a stonemason as well.
I think sometimes, when you're thinking about Jerusalem and those areas, that you think about, just little huts, I think on the side of maybe a little mountain or something like that, but you definitely don't think of all the labor intensive, things that go behind using the stones, and how difficult that would have been back in that time without all the modern day tools. Right.
And the way in which as you said, it's so or some of Israel is so rocky, and the way in which they had to, use the rock in a lot of different ways in their lives. The wheel that they would grind their corn on was a stone wheel that got placed together in order to grind that grain in order to make flour. So they did use a significant amount of the resources that were around them, which basically were the stones and the rocks, those kinds of things.
So you mentioned last weekend was obviously Easter, and I think we all were aware of the pretty dramatic weather changes that we had. It was really warm on Saturday and a little chilly on Sunday for those Easter egg hunts.
That's right. It seems like as I thought about this Lenten time that we've gone through, these 40 days, that we have certainly experienced the ups and downs of weather. We could have a week of snow, and then the next week we'd be in 60 or low 70 degree weather, and then back to snow again. It did seem, and we heard where many places had too much water, and there were all kinds of flooding going on, as well as the power of the tornadoes that touched down. It did seem to me that the weather was a bit askew as we would go from one thing to another. And, the insurance companies refer to tornadoes and floods and hurricanes and all of that stuff as an act of God. And I've always thought, well, that's blaming God for something that we have probably created with our own misuse of the resources that God's given us in terms of our Earth's resources. For us to be aware, another point of being aware of our world, of our Earth. Right now we have some astronauts who are flying around. They have flown around the Earth and making their way to the moon to make that circle around the moon. What they see from out there, this ball that's blue and some other color that we think is our green space, but how are we going to preserve this Earth for the next 2, 3, 4 generations? My granddaughter is 5, and it makes me wonder whether we will find too many straws. I think about all the plastics that we use and throw away, and how that that lack of being able to recycle in a variety of ways, how that really continues to pollute our Earth. What we can do in order to have a viable Earth. Some of these shows that are sci-fi shows have where people are living out on the moon or some other planet because Earth is basically burned up, and there isn't an Earth any longer. We certainly don't want that to happen. And how we can find ways to be able to take responsibility to the stewardship of the earth that God has given to us. So I've been thinking along those lines too.
Well, another important part of Lent, one that we all have a hard time imagining, is Peter, right?
Yeah, we have Peter's story who was with Jesus, and Jesus told Peter, and Peter was kind of like his right-hand man, so to speak. He told Peter, you're going to deny me 3 times before, as Jesus was hauled out of the Mount of Olives and heading toward the Praetorium, heading toward the area of the synagogue, the temple, and the Roman Pilate's house, we might say. For Peter to deny Jesus 3 times, he immediately said, I won't do that. There's no way I will do that. But in the course of Jesus' arrest, all the disciples fled. Peter at least stayed a little close. He was in the courtyard outside of where the court process was taking on in Pilate's house, and also in the area for the high priests within the temple. But 3 times Pilate denied Jesus. The first, a slave came up to Peter and said, you're one of them. You look like one of them. And Peter said, no, I don't know who that man is. And a second time, another intercepted him as he was walking around the fire in the courtyard to stay warm, and said, "No, you are from Galilee. You must be one of his disciples." And again, he said no. But then that third time, when he when he denied Jesus was because of the way he talked. They said he sounded like a Galilean, like someone who came from Galilee. So it was, the way he looked, the way he seemed in terms of being around other people, and it was the way in which he talked that set him apart. And folks thought, indeed, he had to be with Jesus. But then, as we continue and then begin to read after the crucifixion and the resurrection, begin to read about the women going to the tomb, we find that the angel says to the women who come, who also the angel rolls the stone away for them, but and invites them to look in. But they also say, go to the brothers, go to the disciples, and have them go to Galilee. And not only the disciples, but Peter also. It was as though Peter got a special invitation to be able to be included, whereas when he denied Jesus, how he walked away so sorrowful. So, it tells us something in terms of the learning. It tells us something about that forgiving nature of God and the way in which we are able to have second chances. Peter had a second chance. He wasn't written off by God or by Jesus, and he heard that special invitation to him when the women came and said, let's go to Galilee, because the angel said, that's where we will find him. And not only him, not only for all of the disciples here, but also for you, Peter. What that must have felt like to be pointed out, to be the one who probably didn't want to show his face, but yet was included, forgiven, and given a new chance to serve, to be a witness for Jesus.
I think that's one of the most powerful messages, especially coming out of Lent, but in the Bible, is that it doesn't matter how far we've gone in the wrong direction. There isn't anything we can't come back from in God's eyes.
That's right. There's the Apostle Paul wrote, there's neither height nor depth nor anything else that can separate us from the love of Jesus. There isn't anything that can separate us. So when we think we're nothing but a drunk or an addict or any of those kinds of things, when we think we're nothing but a horrible parent who yells all the time at the kids, there isn't anything that can separate us. We are given second and third chances in order to say yes to God, because God has already said yes to us. And that's the powerful message of the good news.
Amen. Well, that was a great discussion, and I know that there is someone listening today whose life is touched by your wise words of hope in Christ and love for us all. Thank you, Helen.
Thank you, Sarah.
If you were blessed by this program today and want to know more about how you can become part of the Stout Memorial United Methodist family, tune in to Stout Memorial's Facebook Live worship broadcast just after this program at 10:45 a.m. Send an email to stoutmemorial@gmail.com or attend a worship service in person at 8:45 and 10:45 each Sunday morning. This has been Stout for Christ, a radio ministry of Stout Memorial United Methodist Church, Parkersburg, West Virginia.